Hello everyone, welcome my YouTube channel. Breaking news. Confiscation of Russian assets for Ukraine recovery, an unprecedented task. Von der Leyen, Scholz. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that Russian assets located in relevant jurisdiction should be not only frozen, but also used for the recovery of Ukraine. There is a will, but from a legal perspective, this is not an easy task. We are at the beginning of the journey, she told a press briefing at the International Expert Conference on the Recovery, Reconstruction and Modernization of Ukraine in Berlin on Tuesday. She also recalled that a special task force has been set up for this purpose. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz also described this task as unprecedented and said that this process is at the initial stage. We must adhere to the principles of law, he said, following von der Leyen saying that the EU is committed to the principle of the rule of law. In turn, Prime Minister of Ukraine Denis Shmyhal said that the seized Russian assets, the cost of which is estimated at $300–500 billion, could become the main source of financing for recovery. He also recalled that Ukraine has set up a relevant task force in charge of the confiscation-related issues. Shmyhal said that Canada was the first country to make necessary amendments to the national legislation. The Ukrainian PM also said that he has discussed the issue with his Polish counterpart Mateusz Morawiecki recently, and Poland is also ready to approve necessary amendments to the legislation. Shmyhal stressed that the confiscation of Russian assets should become one of the key points of focus of the financial Ramstein, which is to be created by the end of the year. Putin weaponizing winter against the EU. Kyiv warns Russia's destruction of Ukraine's power supplies is meant to push freezing refugees into the EU, Kyiv has warned. Russia is targeting exclusively civil infrastructure to provoke a total disaster that could lead to a new wave of migration of Ukrainian citizens to the EU, Ukraine said in a diplomatic note circulated in Brussels on Friday, the 21st of October, in the margins of the EU summit and seen by EU Observer. The aggressor is shelling not only the key substations of Ukrenergo, Ukraine's grid operator, but the generating equipment, grid infrastructure of thermal power plants and key cogeneration plants as well, the memo said. This attack was unprovoked, had no military purpose other than to terrorize the people of Ukraine and create a total disaster in the country, it said. Russian energy workers are helping to destroy Ukraine's energy system. They advise the military on which objects to hit first, as they know Ukraine's energy system since the epoch of Soviet Union, USSR, it added, highlighting the systematic nature of Russian President Vladimir Putin's campaign. The message was also pressed home by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky personally in his video address to EU leaders. Russia is provoking a new wave of migration of Ukrainians to European Union countries, he said on Thursday, the 20th of October. Russian missiles continued to strike Ukrainian power supply targets over the weekend. Temperatures in parts of Ukraine fall to below -30 degrees Celsius in winter. Some 4.3 million Ukrainians have already fled to the EU since Russia invaded in February. Another 750,000 more still inside the country were expected to move in seek of heating and housing as temperatures fell, the Czech EU presidency estimated in mid-October, in a figure likely to have ballooned by now. On the eve of the winter season, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian households remain without electricity and gas, the Ukrainian memo also said. Europeans have been welcoming toward Ukrainian refugees so far, but soaring living costs and energy prices in Europe meant EU citizens may find it more difficult to continue providing temporary shelter in their own homes as winter approaches, the Czechs warned. Russian disinformation was also trying to stigmatize refugees, it added. Putin has a track record of using migration to try to destabilize the EU, by provoking clashes between right and left-wing politicians. His ally, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, forced tens of thousands of mostly Arab migrants into Poland and the Baltic states in 2021, in what the EU at the time called hybrid warfare. Putin's bombing of civilian targets in Syria in 2016 to push people to the EU via Turkey was described at the time by US General Philip Breedlove as deliberately weaponizing migration. Kyiv listed power supply items, such as transformers, that Ukraine needed from the EU to keep the lights on. It also listed the dozens of Ukrainian energy infrastructure pieces that Russia had demolished, writing before this weekend's latest attacks. We need to cut the flow of Russia's fossil revenues. Since the start of the war, EU payments for Russian fuel are over €100 billion, Ukraine said, as EU countries continue to buy Russian oil and gas for now. We call on our international partners to establish an escrow account and to repurpose payments for Russian gas to the needs of repair of damages to Ukrainian infrastructure, Zelensky's government said. What are we doing for Ukraine? Ukraine is defending Europe's freedom, too. Germany therefore stands in strong solidarity with the people of Ukraine and is providing billions in aid, support that is by far not limited to military equipment. Read on for more details about what Germany is doing to help. Humanitarian assistance and disaster relief for Ukraine. The Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has brought immeasurable suffering to millions of people. The humanitarian situation in Ukraine is growing ever worse. During the first 6 months of the war, according to figures of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, up to 12 million people left Ukraine, with 5.5 million of these having meanwhile returned to their home country. More than 4 million of those who fled Ukraine have sought refuge in EU countries, and more than 1 million of these have been taken in by Germany. In addition, there are approximately 7 million internally displaced persons who have been forced from their homes by Russia's war of aggression. They have sought refuge in central Ukraine, where they now depend on emergency aid. For the German government, providing aid to civilians affected by the war is a top priority. Germany is making available more than €1 billion in humanitarian aid to Ukraine and its neighboring countries, as well as for helping internally displaced persons and refugees. Since the outbreak of the war, the Federal Foreign Office has made available €440 million in humanitarian assistance and €26 million in international disaster relief. The funding is used to buy food, medical supplies and heating material, as well as to provide cash payments, psychosocial support and secure housing for Ukrainians. Moreover, the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development has provided €591 million so far to an emergency program that focuses on creating housing and providing social safety nets for internally displaced persons. We are also active in the area of humanitarian mine action, with funding for these projects currently amounting to approximately €8.5 million. Aid from Germany is being delivered to people in Ukraine and to refugees. The German government is also supporting those who have been displaced by setting up reception centers and emergency accommodation facilities in neighboring countries, by providing psychosocial support and medical care, and by distributing relief goods. Within the scope of international disaster relief, Germany already in the first 6 months of the war took in 460 severely injured and chronically ill Ukrainians, for treatment in German hospitals. Meanwhile, more than 160,000 Ukrainian children are attending school in Germany. Nearly 320,000 Ukrainian refugees have been registered by the Job Placement Program of Germany's employment agency. Good day to everyone.